Okay, Godot users, welcome back. Today I want to make an explosion effect, and I'm going to challenge myself to use the sprites that were provided in the pack that I shared with you. So in particular, I want to use some of these stars that can be found in the effects. Certainly feel free to make your own sprites that you can do here. But this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to create a new scene. And in this case, this collision detection is not part of what my explosion is going to be concerned with. So I can just use a sprite. And unlike Game Maker, we can program sprites. You can't do that in Game Maker. I will need to add a timer because I do want my sprites to eventually get destroyed. So the timer is going to handle that action. But I'm going to add a script. Well, actually, I'm going to name this explosion particle. I guess sounds as good as anything. Probably spelled that wrong. Is it CAO? No, it looks like I was right the first time. And I'm going to attach a script. By the way, if you don't want to constantly delete the default comments and things like that, you can actually go here to template and say no comments. You can also have it just be completely empty. I'm going to choose the no comments this time. And you can see that I don't have to go back and erase or work around any previously printed things. So I'm going to need a speed. I'm going to need a direction. And also, I'm going to create an array. So my possible sprites is going to contain all of the star locations. So I'm going to just to make it easy for myself, right click on star 1, and I'm going to paste that in here. And you can see that it's going to copy the path. It will need to be a string though, so I do need to put some quotes around it. So let me do that here. I'll put some quotes, comma, quote, quote. I need star 2, copy path, and one more time. So star 3, copy path. And so I have an array or a list of possible sprites that I'm going to be able to choose from as part of my explosion. And so in the ready function, I'm going to randomize, and I'm going to select one of those sprites. So I'm going to say that the texture is going to equal, and I need to choose one of these. So if you remember from our previous experiences, whenever you have an array, the first position in the array is position 0. This would be 1, and then 2. So I have to generate a whole number between 0 and 2, and I'm going to use the rand I capabilities. And instead of an asterisk, which if you can get a float, like if you don't care if it's a whole number or not, you'd use an asterisk, but for rand I, it needs a percentage sign. And I'm going to say, find the size of the possible sprites array. So the texture is going to equal, actually, I got to add a little bit to this. And I'm going to say possible sprites, and then do the brackets, and then this will generate a whole number. So do I need we'll find out if that works or if I need to go back and work it. But essentially, the texture that's assigned. So currently it's empty. So maybe I should put one there. So PNG effects, and we'll put star 1, but then the ready function will possibly set it to one of these other options. You'll notice that I don't need to put a number here because the size will automatically be how many are in here. And that way, if I add more sprites to this, it won't break my programming because the size of this array will tell Godot how many possible outcomes there are. And in this case, there's 3 possible outcomes, but remember, programs start counting at 0. So my possible outcomes will be 0, 1, or 2. and it'll all work out great. Another thing that I might want to affect is you'll notice that all of my sprites are, actually, let's go to this one. All of my sprites are white, and there's actually a benefit to that. So we can go to visibility, and we can actually modulate and change the color. Now, white, if you've paid attention in science class in the science of color, you know that white is the presence of all color. But I want to get a result anywhere from red to yellow. So if I take the green slider and I slide this down, I've got the wrong one. Which one is it? Actually, I'm going to drag this to orange. And oh, I got to drag that up. That's where I went wrong. So if I have it be red, and then I increase my amount of green, you can see I can get anywhere from red up to yellow. Now this 255, you probably have seen it before. In Game Maker, 255 was the number that you could use if you wanted full opacity or your objects or your sprites not to be see-through. And of course, 0 would make it completely see-through. Well, the amount of a certain color that makes up your desired hue is also 0 to 255. But when we program that, what we actually are going to program is the percentage of the green that we're going to add. And let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to say that the texture, we want to affect its texture. Actually, we don't want to do texture. We want to do modulate. And we want to change the green. And we want to set that to a, now in this case, we want to float. We want a decimal that will have anywhere from 0 to 1. So randf empty parentheses times 1 will give us a decimal. And maybe I can print that. So var orange contribution equals that. Well, I can't. How do I do that? Well, anyway, I'll figure it out. But regardless, oh, I know how we can do it. So var orange contribution equals randf times 1. Then we can print orange contribution and see what that number was. And then we can modulate by orange contribution. And then that way we can see the result, but also see the result of our explosion. So we also need to declare, we need to give a speed. So I would say speed equals, let's say a minimum of 5 plus. Actually, in Godot, you got to go much bigger. So we'll say 100 plus up to adding an extra, and it doesn't need to be a whole number. So a float is fine, 100. And then we want to be able to go in any direction. So direction is going to equal vector2 rand range -1, 1. So that's going to give us a float between -1 and 1. So that could be a -0.5. It could be a positive 0.5. And we want to do the same for the y. And this will give us full range. But depending on that number, it might make that direction a very small number. So we're also going to normalize that to make sure that whatever the result of the direction is, it's going to have a length of 1. So when it times that by the speed, we're going to get exactly what we want. So what did we do here? A lot. So we randomized. We said choose from one of these possible sprites. We said we're going to change the orange contribution. Actually, I guess it's not really the orange contribution. It's the green contribution, which is going to give us anywhere from a yellow to a red. Little bit of science, a little sciencey here, but I think the result is going to be what we want. And then we are going to give it a speed and a direction. So how do we get it into our game? We got to save this as a scene. So save scene as explosion particle. So the enemy template, all enemies are going to have the potential to explode. So we're going to say on ready var explosion particle equals preload, and we're going to preload the scene we just created. So let's find that explosion particle scene, copy path, drop that in here. So now when the enemy is created, it's going to have this ready to go. And when the area is entered, we'll take 1 away from HP. And if HP is less than or equal to 0, we're going to use a for loop. So for I in range, we'll make 20 explosion particles, and we'll say new particle equals explosion particle instance, new particle position equals the position of our enemy. And then we're going to actually get the parent and add child new particle to the parent, because then the next thing we're going to do is free or eliminate or remove from the game the enemy. So a lot going on there. Let's see if it works. By the way, I have adjusted some of the speeds here. So let's see. And we got an error. Let's find out why. So we can't set the texture with a string. All right, so let's take away this. I thought for sure we had to. And I might have to use the word load here, but possible sprites. Now, why doesn't it like that? I'll pause the video. I'll get right back to you. Okay, as it turns out, I did have to say the texture would have to be loaded. So the problem wasn't that it was a string. It was that I had to add texture equals load and then choose one of these possibilities. Another flaw in my programming, so I have to go back to the looking at this. And although I set a speed and a direction, one thing I did not do is do a process function where these things could happen. So I have to say position plus equals speed times direction times delta. So that's the only way that the position is going to be updated. So I had to do a little more work than this. And I've also got to take advantage of our timer. So I'm going to take my timer. I'm going to say it's a one shot. It's an auto start. So I don't need to tell it to start. And I'm going to say that in 2 seconds, I want my particles to get destroyed. I need to connect the signal timeout to my explosion script. And when this happens, I can say queue free. Now, there are some other ways I could eliminate. For example, in the process function, I could have my particles shrink down to nothing. And when they were, the scale was 0, I could remove them that way. But let's see what this looks like first. So I'm going to shoot some aliens, and you can see that I get all kinds of cool things. Number one, each particle chooses its own sprite. So this is working. Here are the possibilities. And then it loads whichever space, 0, 1, or 2, using this bit of code here. You can see that the green contribution is modulated to give me anywhere from a red to a yellow. And now it's able to move. And then in 2 seconds, that those particles are eliminated. So let's see. Now I added that to the enemy template, so that should mean that both enemies are destroyed. And that looks pretty good. Now you might think that the particles last a little bit too long in the game, and that's okay. You can certainly change your timer. But here's one way to take what we have, or the assets that I provided to you, and create a little bit of an explosion effect. And we didn't have to add a yellow, orange, red example for each of those stars, because it's all handled in this array, selecting a possibility from that array and just changing one of the colors. In this case, we decided that, or I decided that I wanted more or less green on each one. And I'm pretty pleased with the way that looks. Now, if I did want to eliminate it by using the size, we could say each frame that we're going to scale minus equals, and then we can say vector 2. And then how much do we want it to be eliminated by? We'll say by 10% times delta. Otherwise, it will happen so fast that we won't see it. And then we can say if scale is less than or equal to vector 2, 0, then we can queue free. So in this instance, we wouldn't use the timer. So we'll just say pass here, and let's see what this looks like. So the spars or the particles should get smaller and smaller, and then when they shrink down to nothing, ooh, that's a little bit too slow. So let's change the rate in which it shrinks by, let's say, 0.25. And delta is a very small number, so that was making it simply too small. Feel free to play around with this, and now we can see that now they shrink down a little bit faster, and then once they become equal to or less than 0, we get rid of them. But I might even increase that. What's 0.5 going to look like? Sorry, you have to watch me do this painful process of experimenting, but I would encourage you to experiment. And that actually looks real good, and I would definitely keep that in my game, and I'm pretty pleased with that. So we added some explosions. Now we can destroy our enemies. Remember that all of that explosion stuff is in the enemy template. So every enemy we should create, we don't have to redo this. It's already in the template, saving us tons of time. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you learned some stuff, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.